Hi there, I'm Nikki Butler, the Autistic Joyologist. If you've been struggling to share your diagnosis with your family, your friends or work colleagues, then this video is for you. Now, I was diagnosed autistic and ADHD in my mid-40s, and it came as both a complete shock to me, but also helped me make complete sense of my life. And when I was initially diagnosed, I was relieved and excited and suddenly had this explanation for all of the struggles that I'd felt through my life. I remember growing up, knowing that I was different, but not knowing why, struggling through school, working so hard at university that I couldn't work out how my friends were going out and socialising and partying, and I just seemed to spend my life studying and reading and rewriting books. And then all of that transferred through my corporate life and then even into entrepreneurship, where I just felt like I was struggling. And if you'd have met me back then, I would have told you that I was rubbish at adulting. That was something I said regularly. And I used to say that I felt like my life was like living in a pinball machine and I was just ricocheting from one situation of chaos or difficulty to the other. And so receiving that diagnosis really helped me to understand the challenges that I'd had and ultimately to help me find a way to move forward in a more positive way. Now, I was really excited, if you like, that's probably the right word, when I received my diagnosis, because I thought, okay, here is the reason that I am the way I am and the things I've struggled with. I wanted to share that with those that were closest to me, but I wasn't prepared for the responses that I received when I did that. And I received an awful lot of, well, you don't look autistic, you don't seem like you've got ADHD. And some people in my life actually rejected the fact that I was both autistic and ADHD because I didn't fit the stereotype or the box labelled autistic or ADHD that they had in their mind. And that was really difficult to process because I wanted them to understand me and know me better, but they weren't believing or didn't understand what I was trying to communicate. And that led me to shut down for a while. I stopped telling people. I became very isolated and insular. And then as the months rolled by, I started to think about why I was sharing my diagnosis. And ultimately, it came down to two things. I wanted to improve my experiences and I wanted to improve my connections and the way that I could communicate with other people. And so then when I was telling people that I was autistic and ADHD, I approached it from a couple of ways. I told them what it means for me. So how does my autism and ADHD impact me? Because we all have such different experiences, and I genuinely believe that whilst we share similar traits or attributes, how they show up in our life and affect us are totally different because we've had different upbringings, different environments, exposure to different situations, trauma, socioeconomic background. There's so much that plays into how we will experience our own autism and ADHD in our lives. So I found it really helpful to be able to explain to family members, friends, and people that I work with or collaborate with that I'm autistic and ADHD and this is what it means for me. And then I would go further and say what I needed from them. So it might be that I was asking for more information or more detail. When you give me instructions or ask a question, can you please be as clear as possible? Or I'd ask questions to clarify things. I might arrange business meetings or social meetups in quiet locations rather than subjecting myself to really noisy coffee shops where I find it really hard to concentrate. So it's about marrying together the why am I sharing to improve my experience and my connection with others, and what do I need them to know? So how does that affect our time together or the way that we're interacting? And that was an absolute game changer. And I'll tell you something, I never apologise. If there is something that I need to change or have an accommodation for example, a quieter location, I never say, I'm really sorry, can we meet in a quieter location? And that's been really hard because I don't know about you, but I've spent so much of my life apologising for who I am that my natural reaction was to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't meet up in a busy place. I really need to meet somewhere quieter. And I've managed to remove that element and just say, could we please arrange to meet somewhere quieter? That will allow me to really focus on what we're discussing and get the best from the meeting, or the most from our time together if it's a friend. And that has made a huge difference. And the other thing I think it's perhaps important to understand is when you're sharing your diagnosis with other people, their first response may not be their only or last response. Now, what I mean by that is when you received a diagnosis or realised and self-diagnosed that you're autistic or ADHD, it would have taken a while for you to process that and find out what that means for you, and give yourself time for that to sink in. It would have taken you time to see how you could perhaps adapt your life to make things easier for you. So remember that when you're telling other people, they need to process that. They might need to think about the fact that they never thought you were autistic or ADHD. So they're going to process that in a different way than you did, but they still may need time to adjust to that. Also, they may not know much about autism or ADHD, and what they do know might be based on outdated stereotypes. Hence a lot of the comments, you don't look autistic or you don't seem like you've got ADHD. So that's where it becomes really helpful to explain to them what your autism or ADHD means for you and how it impacts you, because it helps them to understand your direct experiences, and then they can build that level of understanding and acceptance and support you in the right ways. And if you have any resources that you may have come across, so if you're anything like me, I did so much research when I actually in the run up to my diagnosis and then post-diagnosis, and I do continue to research now. But remember that the people that you're sharing that diagnosis with won't have done that research because it's not in their orbit. So anything you can provide them with to help to educate them, anything you can share about your own experiences is going to help them have a better understanding. And give them time to process, give them time to think about what you've shared. Don't let that be the end of the conversation. Reach back out and have another conversation. And something that I found really interesting was with my own parents, and particularly my mum. So my mum was involved in answering questionnaires when I went through assessment for both autism and ADHD. And it was really interesting that the psychiatrist, for when I was first assessed with ADHD, had the forms from my mum, and he'd said, it's interesting, your mum doesn't really support your version of events from school. So we were talking about childhood. And he said, but your school reports do. So my school reports were littered with things like, she's arrogant, but I don't think she means to be. She's so easily distracted, she needs to pay more attention. She needs to try harder. I mean, how many times have I heard that? She needs to try harder. She's extremely capable when she puts her mind to it. She's lazy and she can't be bothered. All of this stuff was evidenced in my school reports, which fortunately my mum had kept. And when I spoke to my mum about that, about the disparity of memories about my childhood, bearing in mind that I was diagnosed in my mid-40s, about the school reports, my memories and my experiences, and what my mum remembered. My mum at the time just said, you were just an anxious child. I wouldn't have said any more than that. You were just an over-emotional, sensitive child. And since being diagnosed and having so many conversations with my mum reads my blogs, she reads my newsletters because it helps give her more of an insight. And my conversations with her these days are very different. She can now see so much evidence of when I was a child of both being autistic and ADHD, partly because those traits are very different in girls. So again, when I was diagnosed, my mum had in her mind autistic and ADHD boys, which is where the diagnostic criteria comes from and where the research has been done. There is still woefully insufficient research and evidence to support females, to support autistic and ADHD girls, and how that presents differently for us. So my mum's mind initially, she had the idea of autistic and ADHD boys. She hadn't seen any of those examples of those traits in me, and it was also over 40 years ago. But now my mum sees so much evidence because she understands autism and ADHD in females. She understands my experiences, many of which I'd hidden and covered up because I was so ashamed of who I was. I didn't want anybody to know, and I certainly didn't want my parents to be disappointed in me. So now I've opened up, she has a different understanding. And part of my mum's difficulty in understanding and accepting that I was autistic and ADHD is she felt like she'd let me down. And I think that's really important to share, and she wouldn't mind me sharing that with you, because as a parent, when your adult child discovers something like this, it must be incredibly difficult to acknowledge that your child grew up and went through over 4 decades before anybody realised. And I've had to give my mum that reassurance of, you only knew what you knew. You know, it's only now that research is being done and people are starting to talk about the differences between autism and ADHD in females against males. So my mum couldn't have known that when I was, you know, a tiny little girl or growing up through my teens and my early 20s. The resources weren't there, the support wasn't there, and that's really helped my mum to reframe how she feels. So she no longer feels that she let me down or could have done more. She knows that she did the best she possibly could at that time with the information available to her. And that's what I wanted to share with you in this video, is it's so complex, particularly when you receive a late diagnosis or you realise you're autistic and ADHD through self-diagnosis in later life. And you know, when you're trying to share that and communicate that to others, trying to find the way to do that, that helps you step out more authentically, that helps you make changes in your life that perhaps you want and need to make, it's important to understand all of those factors so that you can do that in a way that does best support you and brings your family and friends into a space where they can understand and accept you for who you are. Now, you may well have people in your life that flat refuse to accept you're autistic or ADHD. I had that. How did I deal with that? Those people aren't in my life anymore. When it comes down to friends, that people that I'd known for a long time that just flat refused, and their behaviour really changed after I shared that with them. And the reality is they're not in my life, because those people, in my opinion, didn't truly care or respect me to take the time to understand what I was sharing with them. And that might happen, and that's sad, and you may go through a process of grieving the loss of those people from your life. But I can tell you from personal experience that I feel a million times better without them there, because I don't want to deal with the anxiety of somebody not believing me, not supporting me, not respecting me as I am. But it has made room for other people in my life that I connect with on a much deeper level, where we have a mutual support and understanding, and we take the time to be there for each other. And so if that happens to you, it's going to feel awkward and it's going to feel uncomfortable. But know that moving those people through your life and not spending time with them is probably going to bring you the greatest relief. If they're people that you can't remove from your life, so family members, for example, you can put boundaries in place. And you can put boundaries in place that mean that you interact in a way that feels comfortable for you. You don't have to apologise for that. I think sometimes we get caught up believing that because somebody is family, we have to tolerate all behaviours no matter what. That's not my personal opinion. Having been diagnosed, I now realise the importance of looking after my own well-being, respecting myself, and having really clear boundaries in every area of my life has helped me think about what I need and put myself first. And the relationships I do have are much stronger. Really hope this video has helped you. I've had so many conversations with other women that have had difficulties in this area, and that's why I wanted to share this with you, because there is an increase in late diagnosis because of all of the realisation that for women, the way that our autism and ADHD shows up for us is vastly different for the experiences that men have. Hope that helps. Please reach out if you have any questions, or feel free to leave a comment. Take care.